Good evening. My name is Tracy Metz. I'm the director of the John Adams Institute. Welcome to this live event online with Madam Secretary Madeleine Albright. She was supposed to be here live in person today, so I'm very glad that we can do this event on the same day, but due to Corona, of course, this event is now online. And of course, a very special word of welcome to our guest of honor, to Madam Secretary Madeleine Albright, who is home in Washington, D.C. This event was made possible...
Delighted to be with you. Thank you.
Hello, thank you. This event was made possible by our new sponsor, CLVN. Thanks to them as well. The event this evening is on the occasion of Madame Albright's new book, Hell and Other Destinations. She does have a way with words. And the book has been translated into Dutch by Ambo Antos as De Hel en Andere Bestemmingen. I remember a wonderful quote by Ms. Albright that has stuck with me, also as a woman. She said, given her age, it took her a long time to find her voice. And now that she has, she's not giving it up. And it is a powerful voice indeed. So I would like to give the floor to our moderator of this evening, Elke Bos van Rosenthal, who will be conducting the interview. And I will be receiving your questions and passing them on to him as he sees fit.
Thank you, Tracy. Thank you, Tracy, and thank you, Madam Secretary. Again, it would have been even better to have you here live in Amsterdam, but now that everybody's used to these Zoom calls, I think this is a pretty good alternative. Thanks for being with us. Let me start off asking you briefly about life in Washington, not the politics, we'll get to that later, but the lockdown. Washington is gradually reopening. How have you lived through the past few months?
Well, thank you. I'm delighted to be with you, and I'm sorry I can't be there in person because I always like being in Amsterdam. But let me say, life has been, I feel as though I'm under house arrest. And it is, I think, fairly difficult because I think we are social beings, and I am especially an extrovert, and so I'm finding it very hard to learn to be an introvert. Slowly, I think things are beginning to open up. I took a short walk today, and there were people out with their masks mostly, trying to figure out how to avoid each other. But I think there are a lot of questions because the rules keep changing and the information keeps changing. And I am very concerned that this is not going to be over very quickly. And so I'm trying to get used to this. I've been doing a lot of Zooming, and I'm delighted that we're able to have this conversation this way because I look forward to it very much.
Great. Well, there's a lot of ground to cover. Foreign policy, obviously, which is your specialty, the current social-political climate in the U.S., the debate on racism. We'll talk about some very recent developments. But I want to start off with your book. I have the Dutch copy here, like Tracy said, De Hel en Andere Bestemmingen, which is basically an account of your post-government afterlife, as you call it. There's one anecdote right in the beginning of the book. Maybe you can talk about it. I believe it was Heathrow. You were stuck at an airport and they picked you out of the line. And then what happened? Maybe you can tell us, just to get into the book a little bit.
Well, I think it's interesting because I used to do a lot of traveling in my post-government life, which I enjoyed very much. But I was at one point in Heathrow, and all of a sudden I was specifically picked out of the line to get an extra inspection. And so I'm down on the floor and I'm taking everything out of my suitcase and everybody's watching me. And I never used to do this or say this. I still don't say it very often. I said, "Excuse me, but do you know who I am?" And the guy that was making me do all this said, "No, I don't, but we can find a doctor who can help you figure it out." And it was really hard not to laugh. So you never know the kind of answer that you get.
Right. Well, the whole book is like that. It's often very serious. Obviously, it's also very humorous and self-deprecating, which makes it a great read. I want to share a few photos from the book. There's one photo that's number 13 for our director. It's a photo of you and the Bulgarian-American artist Christo. He's known for his impressive art structures where he wraps buildings or islands. You were good friends. You were both born in Eastern Europe, then fled to the US, and he passed away a couple of weeks ago. There's a photo of him in the book. Why was he important to you?
Well, this was wonderful. First of all, I've obviously known about him as an artist and the various things that he's done all over the world. Very much an admirer of his. And what happened was he wanted to do something special in the Emirates to be able to build this great Kaaba that he was thinking about doing. And he invited me to go with him to go and look at the site. And it was just the most stunning time I've had in a very long time. First of all, to be with him for a long time, and then also to be out in the desert in the Emirates, and to be able to, we were doing what was called Dune Busting, where you are in a car and you go up and down the dunes, and it's a little scary, and then you get out, and the truth is it is kind of like snow. And I had some younger people with me who actually kind of got on boards and were able to ski down, so to speak. He also had a capability of explaining what he was doing in terms of how to meld nature with engineering in many ways, and how to build this incredible Astaba. And so it was just to be there with him, to be able to absorb the beauty of the desert, and then to have a time that was unique in so many ways. I'm very sorry that he passed away a couple of weeks ago, because he really was a remarkable figure in terms of being able to translate his art and his love for art into things that people could understand. Really a wonderful, wonderful experience. Thank you so much for bringing it up.
Mm. There's obviously a lot of politics in the book, and I want to go to picture number 3, which is a photo of you receiving the Medal of Honor by President Obama. I think this was in 2012, so only 8 years ago, but it does feel like ages, actually. And I've been wondering the following, and I'd love to hear your take. I guess the question is whether President Obama, who was the first African-American president, was an historical anomaly, or whether President Trump is. I guess the question is, are the US still making progress, or is it a country in decline of which Trump is just a symptom? Who was the exception? Was that Obama, or is that Trump?
It's interesting to try to really put this all into perspective. I do think that it was incredible when President Obama was elected as the first African-American president, and somebody who had a real interest in how governments worked, how, in fact, he could listen to the people, what his views were. And I think many people, knowing of American history, thought that this was a very important step in terms of having an African-American president and what it was really symbolizing. And I think that many people were very, very proud of the fact that it had happened. I have thought that Trump is an aberration. I have really believed that. And by the way, I'm an immigrant. I'm a refugee in the United States, having come from Czechoslovakia when I was 11 years old. And I'm a very grateful American and was very proud to sit behind the sign that said the United States. I was beginning to note certain problems in terms of what was going on in the United States, even before President Trump was elected, is that there were many, many divisions that had all of a sudden come up. And I was very concerned about them. And I was very concerned when Trump was elected, because it exacerbated those divisions, which is why I wrote my previous book, which is called Fascism, A Warning. And I tried to figure out what brings on authoritarian leaders. And it is the fact that there are divisions in society that are exacerbated by a leader whose main thought is how to have power. We can talk more about that. But I think you've put together two very difficult questions. I don't think that President Obama was an aberration. I think it was a great victory in terms of some movement forward in America in terms of democracy and race relations. And I think Trump is an aberration. But the things that are going on in the United States right now, and the issues that we're dealing with, which is the systematic racial problems and some of the problems of democracy, and what to do next in terms of voting, I think raises the fact that this is a very complex time in American history. And I have been saying over and over again that democracy is not a spectator sport, and that the American people are the ones that have the power to change things.
I wrote a tweet today, or I read a tweet today by David Moranis, who's a great author of the Washington Post, and who wrote a great biography of Obama. And he tweeted, and I believe you're on Twitter as well, but he tweeted, "My whole life, born after World War II and aware of all the injustice and corruption in the world, I had naively believed that good would somehow, some way prevail. Now I'm not so sure. This feels like America's final exam, with race, justice, equality, fairness, and our democracy all on the test." Do you feel the same as he does?
Well, in many ways, I do think that, I don't think it's the final test, but I do think that there needs to be a realization that there are many things that have to change. And that as democracies, as a democracy, the world's oldest democracy, that the people have the power to change it. But it does mean active participation. It does mean trying to explain what the problems are and to be honest, and not to shirk the responsibilities that the people have. And I think many of us are very concerned about the next months and the things that have to be done. I think that what is tragic is the fact that all of a sudden there has been an awakening as a result of killings of people, Black men primarily, for no reason other than that they are African Americans. And so it has raised an awful lot of questions that need to be dealt with. And the question is whether we can keep pursuing it, and that the peaceful demonstrations and working through a democratic system to make sure that we can return to what America truly is a open and free democracy that needs constantly to be listening to the problems that are being raised by the people.
Okay. One more thing, and then we'll go to Tracy, who has an audience question. But I'd like to go to one passage in your book, which was quite striking when I read it. I read the book the past week. It was prophetic. In a chapter about fascism, you write about Lafayette Park, which is a little park just north of the White House. I used to live in Washington, and I took a stroll there many times. For those who haven't been there, it's democracy at work. You have small, peaceful protests. There's always an anti-war protester sitting there, I think, for decades. It's democracy at work. I'm sure you agree. It's how it should be. And you write in this chapter, the panorama is different every day. It's exuberant, inclusive, respectful, disrespectful, alive, and above all, free. And then you write, the whole area could be shut down in 10 minutes, which is exactly what happened 2 weeks ago. President Trump and his attorney general, they cleared the park violently, getting rid of peaceful protesters in order for Trump to walk to this little church and have his photo up. You were incredibly predictive.
I have to say that this was written in 2018, really surprised at how predictive I was. I have to tell you, I worked at the White House in the Carter administration and then in the Clinton administration, and the openness of Pennsylvania Avenue in front of the White House, especially during those two administrations, and how it was to work there and have the sense that it was the people's, that it was in the middle of Washington and
Right.
people could see it. And then this incredible Lafayette Square, where I went many, many times, and there were buildings there that I visited for official reasons, and just the whole place. I was watching the day that it was closed down and the tear gas was released, and all of a sudden the police has gone crazy. And then watching this ridiculous or idiotic, frankly, scene of the president in a photo op that disrespected everybody, the religion, the people, those that were demonstrating, and American democracy. And so I think that there are symbolic things that really raise a lot of questions, and that's where we are now. And I do think that, and I have been asked a lot about what's going on, I think we are at a crucial point in the United States in terms of being able to use it to deal with some of the longstanding issues that were not dealt with openly, to recognize who we are, or we can make a terrible mistake. And so it is a very, very important time in every single way. And I am going to keep speaking out, and I hope others do, and that we recognize the fact, as I said earlier, that democracy is not a spectator sport.
Now briefly to follow up, sorry, Tracy, but when you write about this park, and again, when I read it, and you say you wrote it in 2018, it's amazingly predictive. When you write this whole area could be shut down in 10 minutes, is that also an awareness because of your own personal history and the history of your native country?
Some, I have to say, I do think that everybody in many ways is created by their history and how they saw it. As I said, I was born in Czechoslovakia in 1937. My father was a Czechoslovak diplomat. And we were in Prague in March 1939 when the Nazis marched in. My parents managed to escape, and we spent the war in London, where my father worked with the Czechoslovak government in exile. And I very well, as a little girl, remember what it was like to be in London during the Blitz. And I look back and I think, how did my parents manage all this? Because they were isolated. My father spoke English, my mother didn't, and they had no control over the bombs. The only thing they had control over was their behavior. Then we went back to Czechoslovakia. My father was made ambassador to Yugoslavia, and the communists took over, and we had to leave again and came to the United States. And again, my parents couldn't control a lot of the situation. Their behavior was all important. And so I think that there are lessons from that and how one behaves and how one is able in many ways to make a difference. And my father, on a regular basis, when we came to the United States, would talk about the fragility of democracy and at the same time its resiliency. And so I learned a lot from my parents' experiences.
Great. Let's go to my amazing sidekick, Tracy, with a question from an audience member.
Yes, I have a question from Hollis Kerman, who wonders how much of Trump's unraveling of democratic institutions, alliances, treaties, environmental protections, the EPA, are reversible or irreversible. And she wonders, are you still an optimist who worries a lot, as you have described yourself?
Well, it's interesting. I recently was at a dinner and virtually, and was asked to describe myself in 6 words. I said, a worried optimist, a problem solver, and a grateful American. And those really do describe the way I feel. I believe that if, in fact, we can elect President Biden, it is reversible through hard work. There's no question. But it will require an understanding of what America's role can and should be. It requires us to understand what has happened in the United States and to take action to rebuild and make sure that people have jobs and health care and an education. It will also require a very deliberate cooperation with our friends and allies and putting ourselves in their shoes. It will require understanding what the relationships of international organizations are to people and how we deal with the problems that were there before, which have to do with climate change and now health issues and that viruses know no borders. And we will have to deal with the fact that we're going to have to explain what happened and understand the gravity and that things are not going to go back to the way they were no matter what, which leads me to what makes me an optimist. And that is the younger generation that are tech savvy, that are many of them. I teach at Georgetown University, and many of them are people that have traveled abroad, that speak different languages, that have friends and relationships abroad, and the American youth, I think, is ready to play a role. So I am an optimist. I definitely worry that we will not use the next months properly We cannot lose this election. Everybody has to work, and I am dedicated to doing that. But I do think things are reversible because I think that America can and will play an important role with the right president.
Right. When we talk about the harm, I believe you said that you talked about the harm that this president has done to democratic institutions. And obviously he has harmed the free press, but the free press is still standing. Obviously, he tried to politicize the courts, and he appointed many conservative judges. But we saw this week how the Supreme Court made two decisions that he definitely did not agree with. Congress is still there. They did an impeachment inquiry. It's true that most democratic pillars in the end are still standing relatively unharmed, or am I being too optimistic now?
No, I agree. I think they are relatively unharmed. But what has to happen is the activity of the American people, in many ways, of explaining what we need to do. And then also it requires those in office, whether in the executive branch or the legislative branch and the judicial branch, to listen to the people and to understand what has happened. I do think that there are various aspects that about American society that needs fixing. I think most people really did not fully understand the race issue, which I think has really emerged, obviously, as the original sin of the United States, which people knew, but had kind of thought that various parts of it have been dealt with when clearly not. And having an open discussion about the systemic racism is very important. The other part that I think needs to be looked at is the divisions in American society, a lot of it created by technology and the jobs that have been lost, and that people know that dignity often comes with the work that you have. And it really is something that needs to be dealt with. There are many issues out there. Congress, I think, plays an essential role in terms of translating a lot of what the people want. You also can't forget about the institutional structure of the U.S. with the role of governors and mayors and local councils, the system of states' rights and the various things that happen, and the role of the court. So everything, and by the way, and the executive branch, there are people who love to work as public servants. I have to say, it was one of the most important things I ever did. I love it, and most of the people I know and worked with were honored to serve. I think we need to understand that the people that are in these jobs are those that are dedicated to making a difference, and a lot of them have to come back. A lot of them have to be recruited anew, and not to have people that are only thinking about their political, what they need to do in politics or what they want to do to make money, the business deals. And so there's some very ugly things that have come forward in the last 4 years. But I think we need to regain respect for the institutional structures, which requires the institutional structures to regain respect for themselves and for the people and to listen.
Now, you live in Washington, and when you live in Washington, and I hope you don't take this as an insult, you also live in a bubble. At least I did when I was in Washington. You know, it's the same group of people often, and you mentioned systemic racism. Is that something that you have always been aware of, or has that also changed over the past few years? Because if you live and work in Washington or northwestern Washington, it's very easy to stay in that bubble.
Well, it's interesting you asked that. First of all, let me say that when we came to the United States, I was 11 years old, having lived in England during the war and then in Yugoslavia, and the communists taking over and escaping and all those different things. And I thought we'd arrived in a perfect country. And I have obviously studied American history, but it was an era where there were not a lot of African-American students in colleges. And I go back and I think about all this. But when we moved to Washington initially in 1968, I was just really fascinated, and it was after a decision that was made about integration, how integrated the city was. I had never seen so many Black people in Colorado, for instance. So I thought that it was in a process of moving forward. And if you drive around Washington, you can see that in the end is not true, that there are not as integrated as it should be. And so I think that there are a lot of us that somehow assumed that things were moving in the right direction. And I have to admit for myself that I am appalled at living in a bubble, and also that something more has to be done. And that's why this period is something, I know this is such a cliche, but a crisis often is an opportunity.
Right.
And I think that we need to really look at what is going on and use what the horrible things that happened with the deaths of George Floyd initially, which was all on video, with the video,
Right.
In order to make a difference and understand that it won't happen on its own, that we all have to be a part of recognizing the horrible things that have happened and how police power is dealt with and what difference the government can make and what difference people can make.
Now, it really feels different this time, and I'm sure you agree. I mean, we've had demonstrations for weeks now, which didn't happen with other police killings. But it's also an election campaign, and it's very easy, I suppose, for President Trump, since he cannot run on the economy, to go back to his, let's say, his 2016 campaign, running on things like identity, xenophobia, etc. Do you think President Trump in his campaign can use the present discussion about Black Lives Matter and about race to his advantage? Is that something you see happening?
Well, I'm concerned about how he uses it. Tonight, he is having a big rally.
In Tulsa, right?
And the question is how that will be used. There are those people who don't want to see changes. I have been very, very troubled by the language that Trump has used generally, and blaming and language which can obviously be described as racist. And so I think we don't know. And I do think that the question is how he, when he was saying about various demonstrations, there are fine people on both sides and a variety of ways of kind of doing moral equality when there isn't. And I think this is what has to be watched and really dealt with during this campaign, which is incredibly serious, so that even if there were not a presidential election, we have now been brought face to face with some very serious problems in the society. And I have a fear that it will be taken advantage of during the campaign.
Now,
and
more
so
people.
I think it is a serious time.
Right. More people have spoken out in the past few weeks. Jim Mattis, the former Secretary of Defense. Now, this week's obviously John Bolton's book. He could have told Congress what he is writing now in the book, so it's not an incredibly brave book, but it is a book. Do you see more people coming out against him over the next few months? And I was wondering, for instance, your Republican friends, do they, off the record, are they more critical of this president and his administration than they are publicly?
Well, some, but I am very troubled by the kinds of things that I see from the Republicans in the Senate who have some power, who are not coming. But we'll have to see how this proceeds, because there have been some legislation that has been introduced specifically to do with the issue of racism. But I am not impressed at the moment by the bravery, if you want to put it that way, of some of the Republicans. I believe in bipartisanship. I really do. It has been very much a basis of American policy. But I think that there are some people who have come out very strongly, Colin Powell, for instance, and some who have kind of said they don't want to talk about it. And so I think that we need to see where the Republicans see themselves. And so that is one of the issues, frankly, and especially those that have elected office.
Right. There's another question from one of our viewers, Tracy.
Yes, lots of questions. Keep them coming, audience. One of the questions is from Kari, and she's interested to hear Madame Albright's reaction to the reaction of the military after the cleaning of Lafayette Square, first being part of that whole charade and then stepping back.
Yeah, the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff regretted that he was part of the photo op, right?
Well, I think that they are finding it hard to sort out what their role is, frankly. I think that General Mattis, having said what he said, was very important, and some of the other military leaders, former military leaders, Admiral Mullen and a number of people that were very important leaders. And I think that General Milley actually apologized for being part of that picture. But I think that one of the strengths of the United States has been civilian control over the military, how those relationships work, how the military cannot be used to suppress the American people. So I think that this is one of the big discussions that is out there. And I'm hoping that those that are active military will fully understand that they cannot be used as props, that they need to understand what their role really is in terms of defending this country abroad. But there are very many parts of this with the National Guard and who does what and what the police does and whether the police was given too much military equipment. And so there are an awful lot of questions that have to be dealt with. But I'm very glad that some of the military, the retired military has come out very strongly, and that there are those that have had roles in the Defense Department that are also speaking out.
Right. Other questions, Tracy? Maybe we can do one more.
Indeed. We were just talking now about, of course, the whole renaissance of the Black Lives Matter movement and all the demonstrations going on all over the world. Derek van Dieveren, I hope I pronounce his name correctly, mentioned the 1619 Project in the New York Times, and he said that the conclusion of that project was that the U.S. was essentially founded on white supremacy. Is there a way out of that?
Well, I think it was a very important project. I think that the history of the United States is obviously complicated. And by the way, the history of Europe is complicated. Sure. And I know that one of the things I have found interesting is to see, as the demonstrations have been going on in the United States, that there are also demonstrations in a variety of countries in Europe over backgrounds and who was who when, and what the kind of legacy of imperialism was. And so these are very serious discussions about how societies get formed, what their history is, and how you deal with history. And I think that this is a discussion that we all need to have. And I am hoping, as I said earlier, that we use this horrible crisis in a way to deal with this. By the way, the title of my book, when I wrote Hell and Other Destinations, I was talking about a different hell. The most famous thing I ever said, frankly, was that there's a special place in hell for women who don't help each other. But I didn't realize how germane the title was now, just as you read the Lafayette Square piece. But basically, we have a choice between hell and other destinations as we speak, and trying to sort out what has happened, what is happening in other countries, and what we as functioning members of a democratic society can do to make a difference.
Now, you've said about Trump in the book, you say that he repels me much more than he interests me. And I was wondering, is there something you perhaps admire about him? Maybe not personally, but maybe professionally. Maybe the fact that he got people to vote who didn't vote in previous elections, or something else. Is there something professionally or otherwise that you admire about this president? Or that you applaud?
There is not one thing I admire about this president, I have to tell you.
Okay.
Not one thing. And I do think that that is very hard for me to say because I am a proud American. But I really do think the fact that he got people to vote was over trying to get them to hate somebody else. And one of the aspects, again, in the fascism book, I have said fascism is not an ideology. It is a process for gaining power. And it's based on a leader identifying himself with one group at the expense of another. I do not call Trump a fascist, but I think he's the most undemocratic president that the United States has had, and the things he's done is un-American. And so there is nothing I admire about him.
Now, I'll play devil's advocate. In your book, you write about NATO, which obviously during your time in office, you spend a lot of time on, and you write about the need for countries like the Netherlands, European allies, to spend 2% of their GDP on defense. Trump actually forced many countries to finally commit to that. It's a brutal way of negotiating. It's rude, but didn't it pay off in a sense? Wasn't it a strategically wise choice? He got what he wanted somehow.
Well, first of all, he doesn't understand what the 2% goes for.
Sure.
I think it alienated a lot of people, which he has now made even more difficult by unilaterally deciding to move our troops out of Germany without consulting with anybody. I think he doesn't understand what alliances are about. I do think that when we were expanding NATO, we were talking about the fact that it's not a charitable organization, that countries need to do their part. But I don't think it's appropriate to harangue your allies. I think there are other ways to do things, and it's not an approach as a diplomat that I favor.
But the polite diplomatic way didn't work for every president before him either.
There's a different way to do it, and I don't think that this is the way. I think that NATO is a very important alliance, but I think that some of the things that he's doing since, and I think he's learned the wrong lesson from it, frankly, but I have always said that I thought our allies need to participate with their fair share. That is a very important part. It is something that can be done in a different way than insulting our allies.
Now, I'm sure you still have a special place in your heart for the State Department and the people working at the State Department. I know in the first few years of the Trump administration, there were a lot of empty chairs, many jobs that were not that were unfilled. What's the atmosphere there right now? What do your friends there, career diplomats, tell you? And has it become a little better under Secretary Pompeo?
Well, I think that I am not somebody that thrives on gossip, but I really do think that there has been a disrespect for the professional diplomats, the foreign service officers, and the civil servants, and especially those that have tried to fulfill their duties, and that there needs to really have a way to bring some of the people back when there is a new president. Because I believe in diplomacy, and you need diplomats in order to do that. I don't have a sense that things are better under Pompeo. What is very interesting is that a political appointee of Trump's, an African-American woman, has just resigned because she can't agree with what has been coming out of the White House. So, and then there are general questions about how things are run and what the decision-making process is. So I don't have a sense that the national security decision-making system is working in an appropriate way. And I do think that, as I said earlier, people that work in the government are honored to be public servants, at least the ones that I worked with. And I think we need to figure out how to bring them back and not punish those that are telling the truth by not promoting them or basically disrespecting what they have done.
Now, during the first years of the Trump administration, people always said there are at least 2 or 3 wise men in or near the Oval Office, people like Mattis, the defense secretary, or McMaster, the national security advisor, and these people are all gone. Do you see anybody who may... is there somebody in or near the White House that you're happy about, who may put a brake on Trump's wildest ideas? Is there an adult in the room?
The truth is that those of us on the outside don't know. I
Right.
mean, there has been such a unpredictability in the kinds of things that the president says and does. And by the way, I can understand the following thing, which is having worked in the White House, it is not easy to walk into the Oval Office, which has so much history, and tell the president what to do. And I think that what I liked in terms of working for President Clinton was that he liked to listen to us who had different opinions and did encourage us to have different opinions. I have to say, from the outside, it's practically impossible to figure out what is going on and why and how people operated. We know a little bit more when General Mattis has spoken. We know some more from John Bolton. It would have been nice if he had decided to testify when it would have made a real difference in Congress. But I think it's very hard from the outside to know who is the grown-up there now, because some of the people that have been named to new posts are people that have been sycophants. So I think it's very difficult.
You have
And I
Mitt
can't
Romney.
tell you
Sorry. Yeah.
how hard it is for me to make these kinds of points, because I have been such a grateful American. And as I said, it's very hard making these kinds of points to a foreign audience. But I really am concerned that we don't know enough about how the decision-making process is working in a crucial time, nationally and internationally.
More questions, Tracy.
Yes, Martin Grisel would like to know, if you were nominated Secretary of State under President Biden, what would you do to repair the foreign relationships with other countries after the Trump era?
Well, I would spend a lot of time trying to explain what America is really about and that we want partners and friends and allies. But I would recognize the fact that it had to be done with some humility, but also understand that it would not happen immediately, that the trust that has been there has been broken. And in order to restore trust, you have to show that you can do something, which means that it would be very important as Secretary of State to spend time with members of Congress, who in fact play a large role in not just debating about foreign policy, but funding foreign policy, having oversight over various parts of it, understanding that national security policy these days is not just military and diplomatic, but involves a whole host of other parts of the United States government, and understand the domestic aspect of foreign policy, because it would have to get the support of the American people. And to them, we have to make foreign policy less foreign and make people understand first in the United States and then explain that it's going to take a while to restore trust, but have some humility and then work very, very hard at it.
Would you say yes if you were asked? We can drop your
I
name.
doubt that's going to happen. So I'm very happy to be the voice on the outside involved in the kinds of things that are important in terms of, I'm chairman of the board of the National Democratic Institute that does a lot on promoting democracy abroad. And I love teaching that next generation. And also, frankly, looking at how there can be more players in the national security realm with the role of the private sector, the non-governmental organizations, the generally, and individuals. And then the thing I would be happy to talk to people about, I've often said that people in their 70s need, and institutions need refurbishing, and the UN needs refurbishing, and the various organizations. So I'd be happy to be an outside advisor in whatever.
I was wondering about how Americans look at Europe and whether Americans' public opinion on these things have shifted as well. Because didn't Trump strike a nerve when he was talking, for instance, about how America should maybe stop paying for the security umbrella of Europe? Isn't that something? I've heard that from Democrats as well. Maybe the next generation starts to wonder why America is still spending so much money on Europe's defense. Is there a shift in there?
Well, I think that has to be explained. but it hasn't been. Instead of, because the way it's more complicated than saying that we're victims. The Americans are not victims. We benefit very much from our partnerships. I think the hard part is that we are dealing in many ways with a shifting situation where we need to cooperate more than ever. And that Americans need to understand the threat of climate change and now medical pandemics, that you do require the cooperation of other countries. And it requires talking to the American people and not just making it clear that people are taking advantage of us. I mean, I find that really, in many ways, hysterical and also counterproductive, because we cannot deal with the issues that are out there, no matter how strong we are, totally alone.
Right. Yeah. One more question, Tracy? Yeah.
We have a question from Jana, who is interested to know your feelings about the United States. Would it become a better version of itself if the right to bear arms were limited or abolished?
Well, I think I happen to believe that the fact that there are so many arms out there are clearly part of the issue and the problem that's going on. But it is very much a part of the Constitution. I think it's more a matter of making it clear to people that in many ways, having so many arms is something that creates the dangers and the problems that we're dealing with, and some kind of limits and in terms of assault weapons and a variety of aspects that could be done to, while maintaining the fact that it's part of the Constitution, that there are other ways to deal with the issue through legislation that limits the kind of arms and who has them.
Let's go to one other picture in the book. That's number 5. It's you campaigning in 2016 for Secretary Clinton. I was wondering if Trump's election, according to you, has led to enough self-reflection among the Clinton generation of politicians. It strikes me that the Clinton loss in 2016 was often blamed on sexism, which was definitely part of it, on the FBI, which was part of it, on Russian help, which was part of it. But a deep misunderstanding of the American heartland was also part of it. A reckoning of people like Clinton who supported the war in Iraq, which I believe you did not. But I'm wondering if your party has learned its lesson, because it's so easy to blame everything on Trump now. But did the message that the voter want to bring in 2016, did it really come across?
Well, I think that there are many people who recognize that there are all those things that you say. However, you have to remember that she actually won the popular vote.
Right, 3 million votes, that's right.
And I think that there are certain aspects where there was a great effort to bring out various problems that are evident in every campaign. But I can tell you that there is a very deliberate look at how the Democratic Party will be addressing the problems of today, and how to make sure that the people are brought into the discussion, that there is a lot of listening that is going on, and an understanding that we cannot look backward. That is the issue. We need to think about the future and how different things are going to be as a result of the virus, as much as anything, it was terrible because how it was mishandled by the Trump administration, but it is an issue out there that's a global pandemic that has to be dealt with. It has affected various groups of people that are more susceptible or were left out, and a lot of the African American community. And so there is a lot of analysis going on domestic issues, as well as what was mishandled during the Trump administration in foreign policy. So believe me, there is a lot of self-examination that is going on, and a deliberate effort to rectify whatever issues have been out there.
Right, but the core question, whether you win back, you bring back into the party those working class voters. I've been wondering if Biden, who will be the oldest president ever inaugurated, I believe, he voted for the war in Iraq. He wrote the crime bill that is now being that is now so controversial. Aren't critics on the left right when they say that the Democratic Party, by embracing a person like Biden, did not learn the lesson of the previous elections?
No, I disagree, because I think that Senator Biden, Vice President Biden, has been somebody who has played a very important role in the U.S. government, but also has the capability of understanding what is happening now. There will be a choice of a vice president, and clearly a lot of people in the cabinet that will be of a different generation and younger and understanding to work with the states and a number of different people. There is an attempt, believe me, to kind of enlarge the House of Democrats and to try to bring together the various parts of the party. And I think that there has been already some signs of a coming together and dealing with the current problems. And so I think that Vice President Biden is clearly the choice of the party. He also has the opportunity in selection of the vice president, but also the people that will be around him and the people that are advising him now. So I think that, frankly, the age, I'm the last one to say, is a phony issue. I think that he is somebody, he does have a record. Everybody has some kind of a record. And I think that he needs to, and he has been looking at how to look forward and deal with the issues that are out there now that have to be addressed.
Do you expect him to commit when he enters office to only serve one term given his age? It has been said that his pick for running mate is more important than ever given his age. Do you agree? And if so, among the many names that are being mentioned, do you have a favorite?
No, I don't have a favorite. And I do think that he, I think, is somebody that is very clear in terms of what he already said about the selection of a woman as vice president. And I think that that speaks very strongly for what he believes. And I think people need to listen to what he's saying.
Right. Other questions, Tracy?
We do indeed have a question from Leon Kruimer, who is wondering how the left-leaning elites can win the hearts of Trump supporters. Can Biden do it?
Right.
Well, I think that it's a combination of the left and right working together. And I think that what has to happen is the message that has to be delivered by the Democratic Party is that we can work together, and also that we can work with Republicans that want to make a difference for their country, and that we need to try to figure out, and frankly, first of all, it's the responsibility of every president of the United States to protect our people, our territory, and our way of life. And the thing that I think is so terrific about Vice President Biden is he understands the interaction of domestic and foreign policy. Right. And the people around him have to do that. And because they go together, and it's clear from some of the questions that have been asked, but even more so given the events of the last few months, that is very important. And so you need somebody that is a problem solver, that knows how to work with people, who listens to people, who doesn't think only about himself, and is not trying to make business deals. And so I think that we have an opportunity to try to explain to the American people and to the world that we have a chance to go to an era in which the United States is respected, plays its part, and understands our responsibilities in an international system.
Now Trump survived the Mueller investigation. He survived the Ukraine impeachment saga. He'll throw... the rules don't stick to him, and he'll throw everything but the kitchen sink towards Biden. When can Biden lose? I mean, the polls are in his favor. The economy is doing bad, so that's not in President Trump's favor. Do you see a scenario where Trump beats Biden? And if so, what is that scenario?
Well, I think the thing that I am most concerned about is the voting, frankly, because the kinds of things that Trump is saying now, saying that absentee voting and mail-ins is a fraud, which is ridiculous. And we need to make sure that the voting system works, that people do, in fact, go to the polls, that they feel safe. That then there is the issue just of and I think that what has to be worked on, in addition to the substantive issues that have to be explained, and something that we talked about earlier, which is the interference by foreign countries in terms of using some of the social media aspects to undermine a democratic system. The most important part is to try to make sure that the voting happens, that the states are fully plugged into that, that the system works, the votes are counted, and then a president is declared. And so I think the process is something that's going to be very important, and the discussions that go on around it. But voting is one of the things. And again, to keep repeating, but democracy is not a spectator sport. And I am very encouraged by the people that I know that understand that the young people need to be involved and voting, and that that the process has to be one that is open and works.
How will you help them? How will you be involved in this campaign? I'm sure whenever President Biden or candidate Biden will ask you to, you'll show up and speak on a stage or something. What else are your plans?
Well, I'm happy
when the
to help.
self-isolation is over.
I am happy to help. I have already virtually been meeting with a variety of groups, women or a lot of the diaspora in the United States. I have been talking an awful lot about the importance of immigration. I'm happy, very happy to be as helpful as I can and to speak out, which is exactly why, as I said back in the book, which is it took me a long time to find my voice, and I'm not going to be quiet now. So people can expect to hear from me, and I'm very, very happy to respond whenever asked to be helpful.
What was the main lesson that you learned over the past few years, whether it's good or bad?
Well, I think the main thing that I've learned is that you have to understand what you're saying and why, how it is received, how to make sure that you spend time listening to people and not just talking. That the essence of democracy is when I've done a lot of, believe me, door knocking and things and asking people what they think. Once they get over the surprise that I'm actually knocking on their door, is to listen to what they have to say that they would like to see happen.
Right.
I also believe that it's very important to work with a lot of people on this, that this is not a one-person show, that you need to motivate people to understand why their vote is important, why their views are important, and how crucial this period is particularly. I have been involved in campaigns for a long time. I have never seen one, an election that is as important as this one. And I'm going to go back and I'm going to say I just spent an hour talking to a European audience that wanted to know what we were doing and why we were doing it, and would we be able to bring America's reputation back. I am going to use what I've heard today in order to say how important their vote is going to be in an election. So thank you very much for helping me.
Thank you so much. Just to show that we're a democratic institution, our last question will come from one of the viewers. Tracy.
Many of the viewers, many of the viewers are dying to know the significance of today's pin.
No, well, good. I'm glad. So let me say, because it does go back to the book. In my book, I talk about what it was like in England during World War II, during the Blitz. My father was a Czechoslovak diplomat who worked with the Czechoslovak government in exile. And he was on BBC. He reported or broadcast back into Czechoslovakia. So I was a little girl and I heard BBC. I always actually thought my father was in the radio. But I remember every single broadcast of BBC began with a kettle drum of the first 5 notes from Beethoven's Fifth, da-da-da-dum, which is actually Morse code for V for victory. And so that's what the pin refers to, the V for victory. It can also now refer to the virus, but it really is about behavior during either World War II or now. And that is one of the themes of that book. So thanks for asking.
Before I close off by thanking our guest of honor today, I'd like to tell our audience that our last event before the summer will be on June 25th, and we will be having a conversation with another power woman from American politics, Samantha Power, who was Obama's ambassador to the United Nations, together with Karel van Oostrom, who is the Netherlands' permanent representative ambassador to the UN now. So I hope you'll join us then, and I hope you'll join me now also in thanking Madeleine Albright for being with the John Adams yet again for another incendiary talk. Keep that strong voice going. Thank you very much, Madam Secretary.
Thank you very much. I enjoyed it very much. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate it. Thanks for taking the time, and thanks for a wonderful book.
Well, I'm delighted to have done this with you. And you're going to have a great time with Samantha.
I'm sure we do.
Yeah, great.
Good luck with
Thanks.
the campaign.
Bye.
Bye.
Thank you.